All right, I am gonna get started now that we have our recording ready to go. So thank you all for coming. And due to the size of the group, please stop at any times if you have questions, clarifications. We have the time allotted. I do have time at the end for questions and answers, including my wonderful teachers that are here as well, because they are in the throes of it. And so I'm going to kind of take you through the process of what we did. So I'm calling this thinking outside the box. I would say it was probably October-ish. There's a lot going on at Blessed Sacrament. And it kind of brought me to where we are today. But before we do that, I want to take you back to our why. We have a beautiful school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We currently have 178 students. We are looking to have around 190 next year. But just some really awesome highlights in here. This is our K-4 classroom. We have students that have special needs, and we allow aides to come from outside resources to come in and assist us and help us. We have students that come directly from other countries to our school. And so some of them have our awesome microphones to allow them to work on some of their listening and speaking skills. This is our music teacher. He just started last year, yep. Mr. Rojo, and he has completely revitalized our music program to the point of he's brought in about $10,000 of grants just because people want to support and see his program grow. This is another one of our middle schoolers that kind of shows a really good emphasis of, the technology that we integrate and the hard work that our students do. Lastly, I wanted to show you this. This is our art class. They finished their art projects, and our teacher has taken it upon herself to really embed the fine motor skills, get students going, thinking creatively. We're working on blended learning, not just in classrooms, but in specials, in gym, in music. Do we have it figured out? No. We're not there yet, but we are working on it. But I wanted to give you the faces of Blessed Sacrament, and these are some of our wonderful faces of Blessed Sacrament. So take you back to October-ish, this is all the stuff that was boggling up in my head. Yes, they are shapes, but technically I want to think about them as rocks that totally were weighing us down. Teachers, students, staff, myself, and so, you can probably relate to this in your own capacity. State data. Our students are 96% Hispanic, 98% free and reduced. State tests are made for students, the exact same test for every student at that age level in the entire state. MAPS data, looking at that data, looking at, why is this growing, why is it growing? We started Fountas and Pinnell looking at reading levels. This was our first year to really have a hard look at really where our gaps were. Again, weighing me down. Teacher retention. We had one teacher that chose to leave, another one that said, I just can't do education anymore. Literally up and left her classroom right before Christmas break, left it completely set up. Everything, just left. I was like, I'm done. I'm calling it PCTSD, which is post-COVID traumatic stress disorder. I kind of totally made up that term, but it's accurate, and every single staff member in my building, every student in my building, every parent that comes to my building has a different version of that. So again, something that is weighing me down. Peer issues. Our students don't know how to interact with one another. They were told for 2 years to stay as far away from people as possible and wear a mask. So our students who were in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade have no idea how to function in a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classroom. And then you want them to achieve really high test results. It's just, again, another layer, another rock. Student mental health. Last year we had about a dozen students in grades 3 through 8 talk about suicide. We had there's just so much going on. And it's kind of in my mind, what's more important? The academic test score or the fact that you're saving a life and helping them get mental health support? And that doesn't account for the parents that come in along with their struggles. And there's a stigma, especially in the population we serve. No one wants to talk about it. And they're afraid to do something about it when something happens. Complex differentiation. Talk about that. That was a big proponent of why we ended up doing what we did. It's because in our 5th grade classroom, we had reading levels and ability levels anywhere from pre-K to 9th grade. That's like, how in the world do you meet that need? So it kind of became, our teachers are stressed, the kids are stressed, and it's either you do something about it or you just keep doing what you're doing. So that's where it brought to teacher mental health. Teachers, we can't underestimate what they're going through post-COVID. Education has changed, and no one was taught how to teach in a post-COVID world, nor do we actually know how to teach in a post-COVID world. Do we know how to lead in a post-COVID world? Do we know how to do anything in a post-COVID world? We're rewriting that right now. The other piece is attendance. We went from, basically you could call and tell me you got COVID and you're forced to be out for X amount of days, to now we want to make everyone come at the right time. However, people still get sick. People still show up late. There's just a misconception of getting kids in here, into the building. I was just telling my teachers, I have an amazing office assistant that just started too. She just sent out on her own without asking me, because she does all the tardy slips. She's like, a long message in English and in Spanish with a video about how important it is to get your kids to school on time. But I loved it because I didn't tell her to do that. She just was like, nope, this is a problem. I'm going to do something about it. So these are the rocks weighing us down. I'm sure you could add rocks. I'm sure everything, but those are the things that were weighing us down. So in October, I thought, well, either I let the rocks keep crumbling or I try and do something about it and think creatively. And in my mind, it was, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen is I get fired. So, I was like, okay, well, however, if I change the trajectory and these kids start learning, you know what? So be it, God's got a plan. So I'm going to take you through in this presentation the steps that I took to get to where we are today. Do we have it completely finalized and finished? No. I loved what Rodney was talking about, that continuous improvement. We are continuously improving every day in this process, every day. But we took the risk to put it together. So we've identified the problem, all those rocks. What are we going to do about it? I will be honest that the next one is to determine the groups. It was God's plan, part of it, that in December I broke my ankle and was forced to sit at home on the couch for an entire week because I was able to organize all this. So what I will tell you is give yourself grace, it takes time to put it together. So when I knew that in order to get this going, in order to bring the vision of getting students to be learning and getting teachers to not be mentally going crazy, I needed to do the heavy lifting. So I took it upon myself to do the heavy lifting. I got our math and reading data for all our 3rd through 5th grade students. And I started analyzing and I started grouping. I'll show you in a minute how that works. Then from there, I also thought about, okay, in 5th grade, we've got this group of 6 boys that are learning how to function together again. They can't be in the same group because this one isn't learning, living up to their potential, isn't doing this, isn't doing this. A lot of that has to do with, I go in the classroom often and a lot. I know those kids and I know who they are, what they are, and their potential. And I believe in their potential. Another reason was group size. So our 3rd grade, technically our homeroom 3rd grade is around 16, 18 students, but our 5th grade was about 24. So I knew that eventually I wanted to even those classes out a little bit more. It's fluctuated mainly because of where we're seeing students fit within this model, but I wanted to even the class sizes out a little bit more so it didn't feel so overwhelming, because it would be really easy to have all the kids that are low right here. So this is what I did. So I went through, again, all the ELA. If you've seen maps, I think a lot of you mentioned you're familiar with it. There's the red, and then there's orange, yellow, and then the blue and green. The reason I grouped that is the red, those are the students that are way behind, we need to figure something out. The orange and the yellow, I looked at, those are kids that are either have grown, they're on the cusp, something, like we're gonna put those in the middle. And then the blue and the green, because green students are pretty much where they need to be, and then blue students are above. So, but the green students, it's like, why can't we make them for the blue? Let's challenge them, because maybe they need that. Because that was another reason of why of our students that were high, they were getting left behind. Mainly because there was so much focus on those that weren't where they needed to be. So as you can see, I went through every student. And then I kind of started like drafting, literally draft. I felt like I was drafting them on to different teams. The big thing that I learned though is we have students that were in the red and ELA, but they'd be in the orange and yellow in math. So it wasn't as clear cut as I was hoping. So you had to get creative of like, okay, let's take a look at this one. So for example, this one, our friend, he's in the red, but he goofs off all the time in class. So he's gonna get drafted to a different group because you know what, maybe he goofs off because he's bored. But the beauty of the way we set these groups up, and we'll get into it more, it's flexible and it continues to be flexible where they need to be. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Then I looked at math groups because the way we have it is ELA is going to focus on like the standards together, meaning, and I'll get into it, but ELA, main idea. If a student doesn't know how to identify a main idea, it doesn't matter what grade they're in. They're not going to be able to then cite evidence and explain. So, but in math it's a little bit different because there are specific ones. So what I did is, and I started, yes, they're called higher powered groups, is I put them, and I put, okay, how many third graders would be in this group if I did it this way, how many fourth graders, and how many fifth graders. So as you can see, fifth grade is a little bit larger, but I wanted to even it out because it wouldn't make sense to have 2 third graders and the whole rest of the class be that. That's not gonna create what we're looking for here. So I really had to realistically look at if this was gonna work. And I'll be honest, I started this process not knowing if I was gonna hit a roadblock that was gonna be like, you know, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna work. But I just kept going on the little timeline that I'm showing you, and I haven't hit that cement wall yet. Then it became, what do we name these groups? I did not want group 1, 2, 3. I did not want group A, B, C. I did not want group red, orange, green, because any of those you can imply. You can imply what that means. I wanted kids to strive for something, and I thought, what better way than colleges? Not that because I believe you do what you do when you graduate high school. However, what are we striving for? And universities are pretty much a level playing field if you choose to go that route. Then one of my teachers was like, well, it should all be Catholic universities. And I was like, I like that too. And so Milwaukee, we have Marquette University, University of Notre Dame, and that became which other one, and someone said Georgetown. I had the privilege of actually working and subbing for 2 weeks, so when I had my groups, I actually had all the symbols, each group had a different symbol, everything. But the beauty of it when we rolled this out is the teachers had the kids research the values, the beliefs, the systems at these colleges. And so it's really neat to see. And the beauty of it is like when we have conversations, I know which group is the high group, the low group, and whatnot. But we refer to them as, oh, when Marquette comes, when Notre Dame comes, when Georgetown's there. We don't talk about your high, your low, this. It's where you need to be successful. Any questions so far? All right, so we've determined the groups. Somehow it worked out. So I've gotten to that step. The next part is how in the world do I meet the curriculum? I put this image up here because I loved his face. It's like, it's totally what I had on my face when I was like, oh, now how do I figure out this stuff? I don't. This is where I expected to hit a roadblock of like, this is not gonna work. And so I know each diocese is different. What we have with the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, we have standards, basically the Common Core state standards, but they don't call them that. And then we've been really looking at our priority standards, you know, and what needs to be taught by the end of the year. The other pieces are the software programs. What routes do those, how do they help with personalized learning? How can we embed those within these groups? So what I did is, over here you can see these, and I have it like this, but I have the documents I can share. These are all the Archdiocese priority standards. We use Zern, and we've used, this is our second year with Zern. So I went through K5 through 8th grade, but we used it for 5th here, and went through and listed every single lesson that meets a priority standard. And I basically told the teachers, I said, you're getting so stressed about coming from point A to point Z at the end of the year. No, these are the lessons you need to teach. We found out we were able to skip entire units because those are met in other units. So right there, I lifted that rock off the math teacher of like, these are the lessons you need to teach. Get going, check them off. These are the ones that'll provide you evidence. But you don't need to teach 15 lessons on the same priority standard to every kid. Some kids might need that extra bit, but not every kid. The ELA standards, this is just kind of a example of what I put together of, this is all about characters. If a student doesn't know how to describe characters in a story and explain their actions in a sequence of events, no matter what grade they're in, they're not going to be able to compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, events in the story or drama with specific details from the text. That doesn't matter if they're in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. And so I kind of got to the point, this is where I was like, okay, if I get fired, then I get fired. But I just feel, yes, it's important to have these standards, but what's missing is this. And if a kid is here and needs to learn this before they learn that, then that's what they need to do, because otherwise they're never getting this. You're forcing this down their throats, and they don't understand it and can never do it again after they produce that assignment for you.
You may have said this. Are you using standards-based reports?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. But in reality, when you look at it, they don't have this solidified.
Right.
But then the teacher can support them and introduce and help them understand and see this. But yeah. So identify the curriculum. Somehow this is working out. Science and social studies, we are embedding within reading and writing. And then when they get to middle school, they have standalone science and standalone social studies. But we're setting the stage because, again, you have to learn to read and read well before you can read to learn. Schedule. This is the fun one. So we had always had 90-minute blocks. But before we started this, we had a standalone science social studies rather than reading. Because of the scores, because of the stress, rather than have one teacher teaching ELA, I moved it to 2. The students, so at our day, we start and end our day with assembly. And then all students have social emotional lessons. This year we use Move This World, next year we're using 7 mindsets. And then, or religion, because you don't have to teach religion every day to meet your minutes. So they do those based on where kids are at. Our counselor also uses this time to go in and teach lessons. Then all 3rd, 4th, 5th go to specials. They get it out of the way, get their energy out.
Do you have full-time specials teachers?
Yep. And then we have our first block. And then in the afternoon we have our 2 second blocks. Looking at this, it seems like, wow. However, we'll get to it, but setting those routines and the expectations was the core piece to get this to work. and having the kids know where they're supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, like, and how to do that, because you're asking really little kids to transition. The schedule actually worked out. We were able to make it work. The beauty of it is we also have a 4 days, technically a 4 day school week. Our Fridays are all flex Fridays, meaning kids get what they need on Fridays. Our teachers, as they've gone through this process, have actually added some additional rotations, but core instruction is expected 4 days a week.
That's your decision, or that's the archdiocese?
Our decision. I do things and then I ask for forgiveness. Yes. So I mean, and we just had our accreditation in the fall, and that was still the process, and we received no, like, you need, and that was the time I expected to hear, like, you need to do this, and no one said anything. But it provides that opportunity, like our older kids and stuff, like catching up on schoolwork, doing certain things, and then in the afternoon, we try to do like rewards or little parties or movies, things like that, to just relax.
Is Friday a half day or a short day?
Mm-mm.
Oh, no.
Nope. Yep. So each grade level kind of does it a little bit differently, but Fridays is also our opportunities to have students or speakers come in, those types of things. So.
Can you clarify just a second? This is the first year right now, or this is like the second year that you're doing this?
The micro school, we've only been doing since like
October?
January.
January, okay.
The Flex Friday we've been doing since COVID.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the groups and then the schedule. So, when you grouped the kids, are they in the same, like with the same kids all day, or do they switch depending on if they're in math or if they're in?
They're with the
writing?
same groups all day.
Okay.
So, and once we get into like the flexible part of it, our teachers can attest to it too. Like they have conversations of like, in reading, this third grader isn't at the maturity level to discuss universal design of rights. They're just not there. So, but it's not gonna hurt her, so we had her go to this level. We've had other students that were like, you know what, they can be challenged more. We're gonna put them up here. So it's always flexible and always grouping, and we've only had one issue with students acting like not appropriate with when we switch someone. Other than that, we've had no pushback, and a lot of it is the framing of everyone's getting what they need to be successful.
It's where that culture comes in, right?
Mhm.
Within the school.
Yep. All right, so student organization. How in the world do we get students to buy into this? So this was my epiphany while I was on the couch with my broken ankle, is each student gets a name tag. It has their school's symbol on it, and it literally tells them which class they go to next. And then on the back is their QR code for Clever. So what we did first is each student got those. They found out which school they were in, and they get those before we start our higher powered groups. Then when it's time to rotate, they are able to know exactly where they're supposed to go. They line up to go. But what this helped is it took that confusion piece of like, our teachers needed to look at their list. I don't know what school you're in, I don't know. Where's your tag? This is where you go. This is your mascot. This is where you're gonna go.
It's amazing if you put those things in place. Like we did this, but we did it K-8.
Mm-hmm.
And we could even get the kindergartners with the right things in place to know where they needed to go, and they were moving rooms too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Then it became stakeholder rollout, and this means my teachers, my students, the parents, and then the other teachers in the building. So the first thing, and along the way, I was keeping the teachers informed of kind of what was coming and what I was working on. So when it kind of finally came about, they weren't like, you want me to do what? Like, and I also listened to like, what are some concerns you have? What are things? But it was a lot of like, we're gonna try this, and it could absolutely fail. But at the point we're in education, why not try? So I got them on board. Actually, one of the teachers she helped with all of this, but part of her stressor of leaving education was because of the wide range of ability levels. So, that teacher left and I was able to bring Zoe on, but when I interviewed her, it was about differentiation, it was about groups, it was about blended, like technology, it was about, so that I knew she was up to the task of this. The students, the rollout with them was again, I had 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in an assembly together, just those. I said, and I rolled it out. They all got the exact same message from me about why we're doing this, how it's gonna work, and what we're gonna do. Told them the houses, didn't tell them which one they were gonna be in. And I remember that they were all like, I wanna know which one I'm gonna be. Like, they were like interested in how this is going. That same day, because I know kids go home and talk to parents, I had to be very strategic about this. The parents, I sent a letter home. I explained the why, I explained the process, I explained what we were gonna do. And I also said, if you have any concerns or questions, please reach out. I would love to meet with you and explain it more. Did not have one person contact me. The same day, we had a staff meeting, I think, and I talked with other teachers about what we were going to be doing. I had teachers that have been teaching there for 25 years that were kind of like, not sure how that's gonna work. And I'm like, it's okay. Because I'm thinking, we'll figure it out. And I'm also thinking like, well, you don't have to do it, so you just need to know about it. But the big thing was, I wanted them to understand, the kids have these name tags on. If a kid starts wandering and says they have no idea where to go, look at their name tag, and it literally tells them where they need to go. Also, I said, some of the verbiage the kids are gonna be using, Georgetown, Notre Dame, all this is what that means. Then, if a parent contacts you, like that has an older sibling and wants you to answer their question, this is what you say. I thought of all those pieces because this isn't about low-high. It's about what kids need to be successful and to learn. Last piece is to start. So, because it's literally only been since January 4th-ish, we don't have any concrete test data to really share. But we have, I would say, a lot of qualitative data. I've noticed teachers are happier, kids are happier. It's not without issues. Kids are kids. They're still learning how to function in life. It worked out this way, but I wouldn't change it for the way it was, is when we started the routines and procedures, we had 2 weeks. It's all we did. You were not expected to teach anything like, I didn't say like you need to start all this. 2 weeks. Zoe couldn't start for 2 weeks, so I was like, I blocked my whole schedule off and I said, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna get this going. So when we transitioned, I'd be out there with my timer and I would, you're laughing at me, we had a group app and I'd be like, I'd time it, then we'd get into our classrooms and I'd message, I'd be like, we did that transition in 2 minutes, great job. Voice levels were off, great job. Like, it was just, we really had to get in that routine because there's no time to waste. There's no time, there's that urgency is there, like we're gonna go, we're gonna get started. And I think that was a pivotal thing, and obviously I don't know the teachers' opinions, but like, if you're gonna implement something like this, putting in the hard work and being at the ground level and doing it with them really helps. I was able to see certain students so that when we have parents contact us, I can say, I've taught your child and sat in the classroom, I know exactly what they do. It's just an incredible opportunity. I think by the end of this year, I will have subbed or taught in almost every class in some capacity. And I know it sounds weird, but I really like it. I brought these pictures up because students are engaged. Students that weren't talking before are talking. Our 5th graders that always felt like they didn't know enough because so-and-so did, are talking. Because they're in a group and they feel more confident within that group. I chose this picture because a big piece that we did is leveraged our 5th graders as leaders. Meaning when I was in the classroom, it was like, 5th graders are your go-to question answers. I had a 5th grader that was not happy about that part. But if you need a pencil, ask a 5th grader. If you need books, the 5th graders pass it out. If you need supplies, the 5th graders pass it out. They're starting to see themselves as leaders. I also love this one because you can see, in this image, you can see kids from every single grade level. Kids are smiling, kids are working together. Here, I brought this picture, same thing. You can see a 5th grader, a 4th grader, and a 3rd grader.
And if you didn't tell us that,
You wouldn't know.
right?
But like it's just gotten to the point, it's so seamless. And this book is being read aloud, and then each kid is being challenged at their level. So, actually, I did really good on time. So I know I gave a lot, I know I presented a lot. What are some questions you have? And my teachers are here. I said the one thing you would need to do would be maybe to answer some questions, because they're on the ground level. Yes?
I have a question. So, with standards-based grading, and they're all in different grades, and, you've got kids all different grade levels, what does that look like? Is the report cards based on their grade level, or based on the class that they're in? Does that make sense?
You wanna-
It is based on their grade level. So when we went into it, myself, we focus a lot on main idea through all the bands. So we have the number system 1 through 4. So if my students were in Georgetown, which is the lower group, and we're focusing on main idea, but I'm having to hold their hands how to structure how they're gonna write their sentence for the main idea, where they're gonna find their main idea, they would get a lower grade, because based on that standard on the report card, if you're in 5th grade and I still need to help you find the main idea, then you're probably gonna get a 2. Versus my Marquette group, for my 3rd graders, they're doing 5th grade main idea work. So they would get a higher score because they are going above and beyond what their grade level standard actually expects them to do. So we had to kind of think about it a little bit in the, like, okay, we're looking at 3rd grade, but which 3rd graders are in Georgetown, which 3rd graders are in Notre Dame, which 3rd graders are in Marquette, and grading from there and seeing what we can see. Because with my Georgetown, my lowest group, there is a lot of hand-holding because the independent work is not necessarily done because they don't feel comfortable doing it, they don't know how to put pen to paper, certain things like that. Versus Marquette, I give them what I want them to do and I make them do the learning. I want them to be the leaders of their own learning and facilitate their small groups in a way where I can just walk around and help them with certain things, but it's their job to learn things. And I'm not having to stand up there and teach it for them completely.
And I think what it plays off of too is that 5th grader's understanding of main idea. No matter if they're in a class of all 5th graders or a class of 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, it doesn't matter. That's still gonna be their level of understanding. And if a kid were to, and the beauty is the flexible piece of it, if a kid were to all of a sudden be like showing amazing games because we're challenging them or whatnot, I think we just moved a kid, you guys just moved a kid to Marquette because they're like, nope, she's got it going on. Like, and so once I grouped them, the maths data was taken out of the equation. Now it's about what are they producing in the classroom and for their teachers.
So you talked about it being flexible, and you just talked about moving someone. How are those decisions made? Is it like a time period? Is it you guys get together and have a dad meetings, or what does that sound like?
They would know more. In the beginning, they would ask me if they could do it. And once I got it going, I said, I trust what you're doing and that you have, I said, the one thing is if I were to ask you why, you'd be able to tell me. I'll let you guys, because they've taken it over now.
So we've switched a few kids around based on what we've seen. So us as the 3 teachers that do it sit down and talk, like, okay, because I might be seeing
On a
something.
weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking all the time, it could be
Right.
daily
Yeah.
as well, because, like, formally,
For sure.
it looks a little different, but informally, we're talking all the time. But like, I'll see something with one of my students who she briefly talked about, like my 5th grade, my Marquette group, we were taking apart the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So taking apart the articles, being able to get them an idea what it means to be human, what it means to have rights, things like that. I had a student, a 3rd grade student, who was in the Marquette group, but she was not social, like she's on the spectrum, and she did not have the abilities to have the conversations that her peers in the group were, and I could see that it was stressing her out, and it was very overwhelming for her. Yes, she could do it to a certain extent,
But
but
at
she,
what cost,
well,
right?
yeah, and she would get overwhelmed a lot more. Now that we moved her to the middle group in Notre Dame, it's a lot easier for her, and she's not getting those stressed out, I'm not seeing her like get overwhelmed by any means, and for her, it was on a social emotional level, like, you can do it, but I can see that it's not really working for you socially. And then for our student, we just moved up to Marquette, a 5th grade student, so she's a student that I have in my homeroom, but also somebody I'm seeing in my Notre Dame group who is kind of getting bored, and she came up to me and said, well, in writing, I always finish things before everybody else, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is the time to move you up. Checked with the math teacher, talked with Tamara. We moved her up to Marquette, and it is already working, like this was about a week ago, and she is showing that she can do it. And then a 3rd grader as well, who was in the middle group. She was getting influenced by a 4th grader, and behaviors were starting to show, and she wasn't, because of the situation socially she was in, she wasn't doing her work. So we weren't seeing her performing at a level that we would hope for where she was at. So we did move her to Georgetown, and with that, you can see that she's paying attention. And the behaviors that we were seeing stopped, because she's not being influenced by a 4th grader, she's more with her peers. Yes, there are 4th graders in this Georgetown group, but it's not the specific student who is influencing her to act ways that was not acceptable. So we factored not only in how they're performing academically, but also socially, because that's another component we need to meet. If they are not getting their social needs met, they're not gonna be able to learn. So making sure we're kind of focusing on that level almost first. That's what I do as a teacher. Like, if their social emotional needs are not being met, I can't expect them to sit here and listen to me talk about something they need to learn. They need to be comfortable where they're at and feel safe in their environment before I can put on, okay, now you need to do this. So, because as I said, my Marquette group, I do expect them to take hold and accountability for their own learning. My Georgetown group, I don't have that expectation so much because I know they can't meet that yet, so I'm helping them. I do a lot of guided instruction. Okay, here's the mentor text. I'm gonna have you take part of this, we're gonna copy it down together, and I'll write down what you're saying. Now I want you to try 1 sentence on your own. With Notre Dame, I want you to write 3 to 5 sentences on your own. And Marquette, we work on a completely different, like, unit, but they're doing everything independently because they can do it, and I want them to be independent learners and rely on each other rather than solely on me. So, yeah, we switch around. It doesn't happen often, but it's just based on, like, they're obviously a full child. They're not just a score, and it's not just what they're doing in the classes, it's how they're acting with each other. And honestly, that in most of the cases has pushed us to move them around. Like, okay, we have cousins in this classroom and they like to mess around. It's time to move one of them up. And in doing that, the student we moved up to Notre Dame, he has shown so much more ability because he's not with his cousin and they're not talking and messing around. Like, it's just, it makes a big difference. But it's, I mean, and I spoke about this a bit yesterday too, like, the kids are more comfortable because they're with people at their own level. So they feel freer to speak out on what they're learning and to rely on one another versus when they were just in the 3rd, 4th, 5th. They were kind of, if they were lower, they were scared to speak out. Or one of my 5th graders who's reading at a 9th grade level, she would sit there and read. And now I'm like, okay, now it's time to discuss with your peers. I don't want you just writing it down. I want you to say why. You need to explain that process of how you got here. Not just saying the answers and sitting back. And you need to tell us your thinking and support your thinking based on what you've done. So, I mean, I enjoy it a lot as the reading teacher, because I really want kids to be able to take charge of their own learning. I think it's an important skill to have, and something that is not necessarily always the case. So, I mean, it's something unique we've been able to do. Mara, do you wanna add anything?
Answering the question, the three of us, we talk. Yes, in short words, we talk. So we talk
Yeah.
frequently, and usually we agree with whatever changes we
Yeah.
need to make. So anyone suggesting any kid to be moved, we usually agree because we see it.
Mhm.
So that's how we do it. We don't do that many, but if we see the need, we do it.
We only have about a minute left, and I don't have time to get into why Notre Dame's the middle group, but that's fine.
It's because, well, I can tell
It's
you
fine,
why.
it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Susan's gonna lobby
It's
for
not about
BC,
that.
not
It's
Georgetown.
not about
You
that.
know, I'm kidding. I know, we gotta get BC in there. But listen, so I'm curious to know, I love the focus on the social emotional developmental levels of the students, the relationships there. Tell us about what's the role of the data that's coming from the adaptive computer programs that the students are using. What's that role in some of these groupings and in the changes in the groups?
So I use Lexia levels for my small group.
Mhm.
So I do whole group, small group instruction. I teach 20 minutes of whole group, and then we go into our 60-ish minutes of small group rotations. So there's teacher-led, there's technology-based, there's science, so we're meeting the science standards, and there's sign language reading, because I really want them to love to read. That is something that I'm seeing as well. But I based them on their Lexia grouping, so that way, when they are back with me, I'm focusing on their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Because even within our groups, there are different levels that need to be met.
Yeah.
So I'm grouping them based on their Lexia level, so when they come back to me, okay, you need some more help with finding the main idea or learning how to cite evidence, we're working on that now. Which is really fantastic.
Yeah, and I just can comment on math.
Mhm.
So math, we use Zern, and the teacher teaches the same lesson to third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders throughout the day, but at a different intensity level, I guess you would say. Also, some kids that are struggling, I said, like, ratios and fractions are hard. I said, teaching those, having them do the foundational part of it is okay, because otherwise they're not really learning that. We also use Math Accelerator, so that ties to their math map scores, which then allows them to kind of work on those math skills. We've had a lot of programs. The beauty of COVID, you have a lot of different things. So I would say math, they're constantly working on math. We're constantly looking at ways to improve, ways can do best. Because again, COVID has changed everything. But I would say, she knows where kids are at, and if she were able to be here, she'd probably tell you all of this. And then a lot of, even with Lexia, with the math groups, we do a lot of celebrations, just like the younger grades. A lot of growth celebrations, but also holding kids accountable. They don't do what they're supposed to do. We hold them accountable, and they need to do their work. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Megan, and your whole team. Great. We're headed back to the main room, and please do make your way there. We're going to start at 10:20 as soon as we can.
We were thinking the same. We're